Okay, hey Sheena, thank you so much for coming along and giving up your time to be here with me to talk about travel and diabetes. Traveling with type 1 diabetes also always requires a little bit of extra planning, a little bit of extra packing, sometimes which I fall short of. And in fact, some of my worst horror stories, if you like, when it comes to diabetes are travel related. So I guess, Sheena, my first question is, how do you prepare for a holiday? Do you have any particular steps that you take when you're planning your trip when it comes to your diabetes care?
The number one thing is just bring extra everything, because you never know what might happen. And that goes right down to even your testing kit, because there was once I was on holiday and till now I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if I got pickpocketed or something, but literally my meter just disappeared.
Oh.
Like, it was in my bag at one point, and then a few minutes later it was gone. I literally have no idea if I dropped it, if I was pickpocketed, and thank goodness I had a spare one with me.
And I wonder if it did get stolen. That was probably the most disappointed thief in history. Yeah, bring extra everything is a pretty good rule. I think that's one which I've tried to sort of live by more recently. In the past, I've been really terrible. And just not acknowledge that I needed to take extra care. I just kind of wave it off and think, oh, it's fine. I don't want to be a burden or whatever. But I wouldn't take as much care, and I wouldn't put as much energy into making sure I had everything I needed.
With insulin, I talked to my doctors before I went on, I think, my first holiday since I was diabetic, and she recommended that I bring a whole box of extra pens.
Wow.
For a 5-day trip. And I was like, 5 pens is a lot. I probably bring 2 at the most, 3 if it was a really long trip. But
which you get one thing that I've failed to do on multiple occasions, and I've found myself trek. There was one time in Bali. I arrived and I was only there for a few days, and I checked my kit and I didn't look too closely at my pens. I just had one basal and one bolus with me, and I thought that'll be enough. It's only 4 or 5 days. I'll be back soon. It's enough. And I get to Bali and I arrive and my bolus is empty. This is one of those real head in hand moments, because it would have taken 5 seconds just to check at home and I had pens in the fridge, multiple pens in the fridge at home, but didn't think about it. And I had to spend the next half an hour walking around looking for a pharmacy and pay top dollar.
Yeah, that almost happened to me once, quite recently actually. My family and we were traveling locally. We drove about an hour and a bit to Sepang just for a little getaway. Literally as we pulled up and we got out and I got my backpack and everything, and my dad was checking in, and I opened my bag to look for my bum bag that I always have my insulin in, and I could not find it.
Oh.
And my mom was just looking at me, and there was this sinking feeling. I was like, oh my God, are we gonna have to drive back to get it, or drive around looking for a pharmacy? But thank goodness I had actually put it in the wrong compartment of my backpack.
Oh.
But the relief when I unzipped it and I found it there, I was like, oh, it was amazing.
Your head just starts spinning with do I have to go back? What am I going to do? Where am I going to get it from? Where am I going to find it? And then as soon as you do find it, all of that just melts away.
The thought did cross my mind, I'm only here for 2 nights. Should I just not eat carbs and try? Which would have not been the best thing, but...
For the first 2 years after my diagnosis, I was actually on a range of different medication. They tried me on metformin, which is usually given to type 2 diabetics. They tried me on a different range of basal and bolus. I went on a ski trip with some friends and it was very, very new to me. Again, I just didn't check the quantity of bolus that I had, which is, of course, the short-acting one for those watching at home, which is the one you take with every mealtime. So I had plenty of background insulin, or long-acting insulin, the one that you take once every 24 hours, but I had no mealtime insulin. So the thought did cross my mind, should I just try and, I just thought I'll just take extra doses of long-acting insulin, as if that would make any difference. And of course it didn't. And
it does make, if the dose is high enough, I can confirm that it does make a difference.
Not really a regime that you want to, hang your hat on. You don't.
No, not at all. I think the only time I did it was when I was staying over at a cousin's house, and I realized that I was pretty much like almost empty with my bolus, and I had actually just eaten like a pasta. I actually tend to give my boluses towards the end of my meal when I know how much I've eaten. I don't really like giving it before because I don't know how much I'm going to eat before I give.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
I'm not sure how much I'm going to eat until I'm actually like eating, and then if I've injected too much, then I have to like stuff more food down, or if I'm injected too little, then I have to give 2 injections. So it's just easier for me to do it after. The story there where I had that big bowl of pasta, I had long-acting insulin, and I just dialed up the dose and I gave it, and I actually ended up having a hypo from that.
Oh wow!
The next morning when I woke up, because I had this for dinner, and I woke up and my blood sugar was 2.8.
That's low. I tried to survive without bolus for a couple of days, and by the 3rd day, I was just like sick as a dog. And it got to the point where we just happened to be, because of course this was my luck, you know, we have to be like on the very top of the mountain, when I just realized I just couldn't really go on any further. I needed to get my sugars down. I was feeling absolutely wretched. It could have been the hangover too, because you know, it was a ski trip after all. Top of the mountain, I realized I really need to sort myself out. So I was only a very beginner. I mean, I'm still a beginner, very beginner snowboarder at the time. So I made it down that mountain painfully slowly, and found my way into town. And luckily, I mean, it's a big skiing resort. It's a big village, but nevertheless a village. And made my way to the pharmacy. And asked in my very broken, very basic French if they had any, you know, Humalog insulin. And luckily, miraculously, I was able to get hold of it. But the irony for me in that, and this is why I think talking about holidaying and diabetes and so on is an interesting topic and an important one. The irony for me was that I think I subconsciously or even consciously didn't prepare or pack as much as I should have done. I just kind of brushed it aside and thought, no, like, forget the medicine, it'll be all right, whatever. Let's not be a burden. I didn't want to like bother my mates with it. I didn't want them to feel any kind of different. I didn't want them to feel like they had to take care of me, or they had to, or that I would be putting them under pressure to, you know, to live healthy alongside me or anything like that. But the irony was, of course, the fact that I did have to go to the pharmacy. I did have to go into town by myself, and I had to leave them waiting for me for like 4 hours at lunch while I went, because we can't find each other on the mountain very easily. So I ended up having to leave them waiting for me for hours and hours. So like, ironically, I was a much bigger burden to them than if I just packed an extra pen and just got on with it as normal.
I tend to try and err on like the side of caution. So if I'm bolusing for something, especially because I know that I'm probably going to be dancing, walking around, I won't give quite as much of a bolus, whatever I'm drinking. And if that results in some high blood sugars later on, I can always correct for it. But I always try to keep my blood sugars running a little bit higher than if I were just like around here when I'm sitting at a bar and having a few drinks, then, you know, I would give the full dose.
Yeah.
I always also try and make sure that someone around me knows I'm diabetic, because I do like to go backpacking on my own, and it's obviously not the safest because people around you haven't known them for ages and stuff. But if I make a friend, I do try and just like let them know, like, hey, by the way, like, I am a type 1 diabetic, so if anything should happen, don't give me insulin, give me sugar. Because
yeah, that's
people think that, like, if, like, God forbid you were to pass out or something, they think that you're supposed to stab them with an insulin pen, and I'm like, no, you give me sugar.
Right, no, yeah, the exact opposite. But I can sympathize, or I can at least understand kind of why that would be the assumption, because I guess they see us injecting in regular time, they just assume that that's what's taking care of us. So if something goes wrong, I guess they would see that as like the cure as well. I mean,
yeah, and then also like when you like hit the beach and stuff, and your insulin is like in the sun and everything, like I always try and keep it under the shade. But I'm sure that's not the most effective thing when it's boiling out. But I found this the other day. I bought this a year ago, and it's still in the box.
Still very much in the box, I see. Yeah.
Isothermal bag, which keeps your insulin cold for 3 days.
I was going to say, do you keep it in the fridge beforehand and then it keeps itself cool, or is there like an ice pack in there? I mean, that could come in pretty handy in Malaysia. I mean, it's regularly 30 degrees, if not more, out, and humid to boot, and not ideal conditions to be carrying insulin around at the best of times here either. So holiday or in Malaysia, that could probably come in pretty handy. And now that you've finally got it out the box, who knows, it might be your new favorite thing. If not insulin, it's test strips. Like even on my most recent trip, it was just a quick trip away to Penang. Again, spent about 45 minutes riding around town trying to find a pharmacy which had the right test strips in store. And it was on a Sunday, which made things even harder. Diabetes itself has not once got in the way of my of a trip, or a trip that I wanted to do, or a journey that I wanted to make, or an experience or an adventure that I wanted to have. Diabetes itself, like my condition, has never got in the way of that. And it's amazing to hear you say as well, like you like to go backpacking solo. And it doesn't prevent you doing that. All you have to do is just let someone know, make someone aware that you have this condition and what to do. And it's just something as simple as just making sure that you have some sugar nearby. So the lesson, like for me, like anybody listening, maybe there's someone listening who's newly diagnosed or is a little bit unsure about traveling with diabetes and how do you go about it. Like the real answer is diabetes does not stop you doing anything or having any experience or doing anything you want to do. The only thing that will stop you is you. The only thing in your way is you. And make sure that you have extra everything. Make sure you've got double up on test strips, because actually on a holiday you should be testing more than you do regularly. If you're going to a hot climate, because insulin sensitivity tends to increase in warmer weather, so you might find that your bolus dose has to be slightly less. And if you're walking around, doing a lot of cultural activities and what have you, or in Sheena's case, partying, the bottom line is it doesn't get in the way of you doing anything. And it's really not that much. It's an extra 5 minutes, making sure that you have.
Make a list. Lists are helpful. Just like every time you're going on a trip, just check things off. One of the things that's handy to have on that list as well is a little letter explaining that you are diabetic, so that when you go through airport security, you don't have any issues when someone doesn't know what insulin is, because that has happened to me before. Put this in context. I was coming back from Phuket. We hadn't slept the whole night. We had a 7 a.m. flight to catch. I was cranky. I was so cranky.
I've been on one of those flights before. I know how you feel.
Yeah, and so we get to airport security, and when my insulin, like I actually took the insulin out of the bag, because you have to do that sometimes at the more sensitive airports. Like they do count that as a liquid. So I took it out, put it in the little bag, everything. And the lady picks it up and she's like, "Oh, what's this?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm diabetic. Here's my letter." And she has the nerve to tell me that I am not diabetic.
Huh.
I don't know what to say. Because you're telling me about my condition.
First of all, how dare she? Like, how dare she? Second of all, like, how does she? How does she do that? Is it because she just assumes you're not like overweight? You're not type 2 kind of thing? Is that? Are we getting down to this level of stupidity here? Like, what?
She was kind of like adamant that no, you're not diabetic, and I was like, but I am. And it just got to the point where I was like, "Can I see your manager?" Because I was so tired that I was like, have you ever fallen asleep when you're standing? Because that's a thing and it's terrifying. I was at that stage, so I was just like, I want to see your manager. And then he came over, and then it got sorted like really, really quickly. I think like maybe they just hadn't trained their staff to understand. I've
actually been quite lucky. I don't even bother most of the time putting my insulin in a little plastic bag, and I just carry my needles with me. And I've actually never had any trouble, apart from one time when my stuff went through the X-ray, and someone kind of, because I carry it's like a pencil case with all my needles and pens in it, and this woman starts waving it at me and asking me if it's mine and come over here and everything, and she starts going through it, and already I'm tense because I'm just prepared. I don't know why. I'm just prepared for an argument. I'm just prepared to tell them to go fuck themselves and say, no, I am diabetic. Like, just I need these needles and whatever. And it turned out all they wanted to do was just check where I was sitting. Oh no, they were like, yeah, can we see your boarding pass and your passport again? And I started getting very like defensive, like why, what's wrong with it, what's going on? It's just my medicine, for God's sake. Like, why do you need to see my passport? I've already checked in. And they were like, no, so it's all okay. We just want to make sure that you're sitting in the right place so that we can alert the flight crew that, you know, there's a diabetic sitting in seat 16C or whatever. So it was actually them. It was nice, actually. It was actually them being proactive. So I felt very embarrassed that I'd been so short with them, and I've apologized profusely. But otherwise, I've been quite lucky.
Nice.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't carry doctor's notes. I've gotten away with not putting my things in those annoying little plastic bags. So I guess I've been quite lucky. There was one incident I had actually at airport security, but it wasn't quite because of my kit. It was coming back from Bali, and it was an evening flight. It's kind of the reverse of yours in Phuket. Ours was an evening flight, but we'd been drinking all day. We'd come straight from the beach club to the airport, and you know, and I'd taken some bolus, which turned out to be a little bit, I was a bit over exuberant with the bolus, and that plus drinking, which lowers your blood sugar, that plus drinking in the hot sun, which lowers your blood sugar even further. By the time we got to the airport, I was having a hypo and didn't know it, because I put like I put the flush and the sweats down to the fact that we'd been out drinking in the sun all day. I thought I was just a bit sunburnt and a bit dehydrated, but actually my blood sugar was dropping dangerously low. And all of us, and we're standing in the queue for the airport security, and this was horrible. Standing in the queue for airport security, and all of a sudden I just know, I'm like, shit, that something's happening. And I turn to my friends, and my friends know that I'm diabetic, and they know the symptoms, they know what to do. And so all of a sudden, these two girlfriends of mine that start running ahead of me in the queue, like elbowing people out the way, shouting at the top of their voice, like, diabetic, like, make way for the diabetic. I mean, it was, I'm grateful that they did, because it got us straight to the head of the queue and straight past because I needed sugar. Like I was in the middle of a long queue and I needed sugar. I didn't have anything on me, and I needed to get something down me as quick as possible. So they started clearing a path for me, you know, making a beeline to the check-in counter, and then got through to the other side and just shoveled sugar down my throat. I think I got like a bottle of Coke and some other stuff, and just sat there recovering for 20 minutes. But then I felt, you know what, I felt so ashamed after that I went to the smoking area just so I could stand outside for a bit and just cried. I think it's because like it's just not, it wasn't a particularly good experience. I mean, I think the hypo itself wasn't much fun, but then having your friends like shouting at the top of their voice, diabetic, like isn't much fun either. But it was a bit of a wake-up call for me as to like, you know, how I need to take better care of myself.
To be fair, like, I mean, I tend to try and take as much care as possible. Like I tend to prepare stuff, but I still don't carry sugar with me at most times, which is really bad. At home, I have to buy stuff that I don't like so that I don't end up like eating it before I have the hypo. I
think, okay, it would be fun because we've only got a couple of minutes left. So let's kind of like round this out with a few top tips, I guess. Now we've covered a couple, which would be number one. I guess the number one rule to follow is proper planning prevents poor performance, right? So it's just taking that extra 5 minutes and making a list of everything that you need, and making sure you have double everything on that list.
Yeah, just bring it, can't hurt.
Just bring it. It could be a slogan.
Yeah, if you are in a situation where you, for some reason, airport security is being horrible and you can't get it through in your hand luggage, your best bet is wrapping it in like a bunch of clothes and putting it right in the middle of your check-in luggage, because it's not the best because the hole does get really cold, but I have had insulin survive that way. Okay,
so number one, prepare, plan, prevent poor performance. Take everything, pack double.
Test extra when you're on holiday.
Test extra.
Because you're eating lots of unfamiliar foods and walking lots, because I find like the unfamiliar foods spikes your blood sugar, but then because you're walking all the time compared to when you're not on holiday, it like kind of evens out in ways that you don't really expect. So there was once I was on holiday, I was eating an ice cream. I didn't even bolus for the full ice cream. Boom, had a hypo right after that. Like,
wow, just because you were walking around in the hot sun, you think, and just
yeah.
There you go. Okay, so test extra. Good rule number two. Number three, I think we can go for let's use the buddy system. Make sure you use the buddy system, whether you're traveling alone, solo backpacking, or whether you're with a group of friends. Make sure at least one person you're with, whether they're a close friend or even just someone who you know you'll be with that night. Make sure they know what the situation is. You don't have to give them the whole, your full medical history. Just tell them that if you start, sweating a little bit extra, or if you just tap them on the shoulder and ask for sugar, make sure they know just to hand you the sugar, and make sure they know especially not to inject you with anything. Because actually, I don't think anybody should be injecting anyone with anything. I know there's like the glucagon, the emergency glucagon thing, but I think if you're at that stage where you need that, you should be at hospital already.
Yeah.
So number three, bring a buddy. Number four, I would say don't let diabetes get in the way of anything, because it really doesn't have to. Don't ever feel restricted or that you can't participate in any kind of activities. I mean, it depends on your care. Some people, for example, with pumps might find it more difficult to do like water skiing or some such, for example. So I guess it kind of depends. Generally speaking, diabetes is not restrictive in the sense that the condition itself doesn't restrict you from participating in anything. It's just the only thing that will stop you is you and your mind. So I've learned to my own detriment, whether it's being stuck on the top of a mountain or having a hypo in the middle of airport security, or riding around for 45 minutes looking for a pharmacy. Those were all perfectly avoidable circumstances if only I'd followed my own rule number one.
Definitely, just don't let it stop you. I've been literally on a boat in the middle of Halong Bay thinking I never thought when I got diagnosed that I would be able to just be completely carefree on holiday. And of course it's not completely carefree. I had my insulin nearby, but it doesn't stop you from having these experiences. It doesn't stop you from really seeing what life has to offer. So definitely, if you're newly diagnosed, don't get caught up in this whole doomsday feeling like your life has changed forever. You'll never get to experience life as you would have without diabetes. It's definitely fully within your reach.
Yeah, that's an amazing point to mention. For example, I got my PADI license just this summer. Of course, you have to disclaim that you are a diabetic so that the instructors know what to do with you, because it's actually, officially, scuba diving is apparently contraindicated by medical professionals because of the risk of hypos underwater. Because if you go hypo, if you fall, God forbid, if you fall into a diabetic coma underwater or start having difficulties when you're 10 meters beneath the surface, dangerous game, very dangerous game. So they don't recommend it, but luckily, the scuba diving school course that I went on, the guys were so great. They even taught me how to open and drink a juice box underwater. It was magic, honestly. So it's because you pierce it upside, you hold it upside down and pierce the straw upwards, and it just creates an air pocket. Yeah, and it creates an air pocket so that no liquids actually there's no liquid exchange. So then you just lift your wrist and just squeeze it into your mouth, into the corner of your mouth. So yeah, so part of my training was diving to, I think we went to 6-7 meters deep and opened up a Ribena, and just. Yeah, it was amazing. So because hypos are common because you're moving around a lot as you're swimming and moving, even if it doesn't feel like you're doing anything strenuous, you're still moving around a lot. And also because the water is colder the deeper you go, your body starts burning off energy to keep itself at a stable temperature. So actually you use more energy down there than you think, which of course has an effect on your sugars. So it's always good to err on the side of caution by staying on the high side of things, I guess. But yeah, I just always made sure that I had a juice box in my BCD, and a supply of Skittles on board the boat if I needed it. And that was that. It was really, really not any more inconvenient than that. It wasn't inconvenient at all. If anything, it was great learning I could drink underwater. Possibilities are endless.
Rule number 5. Bring sugar with you.
Okay, that's a good rule number 5. Yeah,
I don't follow that either, but I should, because it makes life so much easier if you just have it with you.
Let's tell you what, let's make a pact to follow these rules that we've just created. Well, no, we can't claim the rules, but we can claim the list. Let's make a pact to follow those on every trip we next take. When do you think you'll next be going away, by the way? Do you have anything coming up? Any domestic travel?
Nothing. I actually just found out recently that domestic travel was a thing again. I actually thought we weren't allowed to. But I've got nothing planned for this year. Probably, I hope by March next year, maybe I can do a birthday trip.
I just really hope that, people stay safe, stay sensible, and, and stick to the rules basically, and that we don't have to go back to lockdown all over again, because I'm not sure I could do 9 months without a trip.
No, it was horrible.
Yeah, it really was. Anyway, but for now, that's all we've got time for. So I'll say thank you and take care, and I will see you again hopefully very soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.